Now, AirAsia CEO Tony Fernandez has continued to tweet messages of support for his families and the employees involved. In one of his latest tweets, Fernandez said that he had spent most of Monday's meetings with families of the Flight 8501. Now, for more on what this means for the airline industry as a whole, I'm joined by Seth Kaplan. He's the managing partner at Airline Weekly. Seth, it's good to see you again. A very odd situation. We're talking about this again. This time, it's quite different. You have been talking, of course, to different executives in your circle of expertise. What has been the reaction there?
Yeah, of course, nobody shocked that an accident can happen. Everybody sort of feeling like this is an airline that is as safe as any. We heard Jessica there talking about it. It's a very good safety record overall. An airline that, if anything, has really had to go above and beyond in terms of safety because, Phil, while in some parts of the world, the U.S., let's say, Europe, passengers no longer worry necessarily about flying a budget carrier. You know, they don't feel like cheap tickets equate to cutting corners on safety. In Southeast Asia, AirAsia, as the first large budget carrier, really had to change minds about that. Really had to convince people that, yeah, you can come on here with those low average fares we heard about, but be just as safe as on any other airline. And that has indeed been the case.
Seth, I mean, they had a good record. They had a good reputation. Does any of that change with this, or is it just too early to tell?
Well, it's a blemish on that record, clearly. You know, I mean, you think of an airline like Southwest Airlines, which for most of its history had been the safest airline in the history of the world, and then had an accident where there was a single fatality on the ground not too many years ago, and all of a sudden the airline that had, you know, always had no fatalities could no longer say that. So yes, you know, this breaks that record, but you know. If this is the only incident, passengers will probably get past this and eventually be lured back by the same things that always convince people to travel.
Seth, I want to get to a couple of things that, you know, we're still getting facts, of course, of this. And one of the facts we do know is that there was a storm. The pilot apparently radioed to say they wanted to go above or around the storm. Tell us why this is significant, because we hear about storms all the time. Why is this storm any different than any other storm? And do we read anything into that in terms of the procedures of how pilots operate?
Yeah, a little too early to know. Pilots tend, Phil, to prefer to fly around bad weather rather than to try to get on top of it when that's possible. And in this case, meteorologists are saying this was a rather high storm. So it's not yet clear, for example, had they gotten clearance to go to 38,000 feet instead of 32,000, whether they indeed would have been able to fly above the weather. So, you know, what exactly they were thinking, not yet clear, but you know, they very clearly saw themselves flying into some weather that they didn't want to fly into, and you know, sometimes you can have a front of bad weather that extends laterally for such a distance that it's just not possible to fly around it.
Seth, you and I have had a number of conversations about the industry, and I want to give you a fact that you probably already know, but you've had 2 missing aircraft, one that was essentially shot down. 3 of those planes were Malaysian-based planes, basically, which accounted for 50% of all airline deaths this year. Is this unusual?
Well, it's certainly unusual, you know, and you can't blame people for saying, you know, what's going on in Malaysia. We should say, in this case, technically not a Malaysian airline. It's an Indonesian registered airline, but yes, absolutely, with its parent company in Malaysia. Phil, you know, the incidents are all sort of dissimilar from each other. Here we're looking at something that likely involved weather. We'll find out later whether there was anything mechanical or, you know, crew error. The others, you know, both in one case, certainly something nefarious happened. The second incident and the first certainly seemed like perhaps foul play. So not all that similar to each other. I guess the best way to say it is the way just kind of the law of averages work, is that it would be unusual if things were evenly distributed throughout the world all the time.
I have time for one more quick question, Seth, and I want to get to this. Look, if they find the aircraft and they find out what happened and what went wrong, I mean, that is good because you want to know what happened in terms of a disaster like this. What if they don't find the aircraft? I mean, what if we're left with no answer once again? I mean, what does that do to confidence?
Well, it hurts confidence, certainly, Phil. I would say in this time, and I remember speaking with you soon after MH370 and saying even early, I don't know if we'll ever find this thing. In this case, I really don't think that'll be the case, but no question, Phil. If that changes, and if in fact they never find this thing, well, then that would indeed not be helpful. I mean, people will still fly, But yeah, that's not what anybody is hoping to have as an outcome. Even if, as increasingly appears to be the case, the news will be bad regardless. These people
All
will
right.
not have survived.
Seth, thank you very much again for coming on and explaining to us what's happening in that part of the world. Thank you.